Innovation, Science and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne joins me now. Minister, thank you so much for your time, for giving us your time today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
I want to kind of go through what you are asking now the telecoms to do to reach that formal agreement. You've given them 60 days, but really focusing on things like the mutual assistance during outages, working together on the emergency roaming, and of course assisting each other during what was a crisis like this. Talk to me more about that, because of course the question comes about, had something like this, these incentives put in place prior to all of this, could all of this have been prevented?
So the first thing I expressed today, let me be clear, I expressed the frustration of more than 12 million Canadians which were affected by the outage that we have seen in the last few days. I expressed the frustration of small and medium-sized businesses, frankly, who could not, offer payments to electronic, facilities. And the third thing, frustration for the emergency workers where the 911 service was down. So that was the first thing, and you said it. I said it was unacceptable and full stop. Now, once this is said, you're quite right. I said that I demand and expect that we formalize a formal agreement to do three things. These arrangements, to be clear, Angie, they were existing in form of informally between them. They wanted to assist. And I want to say that when I was in Japan and called the CEO of Rogers, I immediately called also the CEO of Bell and TELUS, and all of them were willing to support with technicians, with additional capacity on network. So what we want to do in the mutual assistance is really to have a formal framework so there's a protocol in place. The emergency rooming is something also which is inspired with what has been done in the United States just recently on the 6th of July, where they implemented something more resilience in the network in terms of natural disaster. And the third thing is a communication protocol. Communication protocol with respect to their customers and the authority, because I think the type of information that was given to Canadians was one thing in many respects. So, and I was very clear, Angie, as well, this is just initial steps. Those are the immediate steps that I want them to take to improve resiliency. The next logical step, as you suggested, is the CRTC investigation to go to the root cause analysis. You heard from the CEO of Rogers say that was a coding error. How could that have happened? How do you prevent that? A bit like with air disaster, you start looking and try to understand what really happened and how can you prevent it. That's in the spirit, but I was very, very clear. This is only the initial steps. There'll be the inquiry recommendation, and we'll be looking at additional steps to improve resiliency of our network, because we want them to definitely learn from what happened and make sure we implement best practices.
Will that resiliency include greater competition for the telecommunications infrastructure in Canada?
Well, obviously, there would have been a lot to talk about today with the different CEOs of the telcos in Canada. Competition, affordability is always top of mind, and I reminded them. But I would say that today was very much focused on resiliency in light of the outage we've seen, which is quite unprecedented in our country. The focus, we discussed for more than an hour, and this is just one of a number of meetings we're going to have, but clearly they understand that, yes, we want more affordability, we want more competition, but at the same time, we need to now fix the resiliency issue. This was an error, a failure by Rogers, but that being said, that's why I directed them to enter into this agreement within 60 days. And they all said that they will do so, and that will improve the resiliency. Obviously, there's more to come, because you always need to look at how much more we can do. We're going to look at international best practices, because the failure you've seen in the last few days required international experts to even figure out what happened. So we're going to be learning from that and making sure that they do everything that is needed to be done to prevent that from ever happening again.
And looking again, when we talk about the Rogers-Shaw deal, had that already gone through, then you would be looking at more customers potentially being affected by this. Is this now going to impact that review into that potential deal?
Well, I've been very clear that my frame of mind when it comes to the Shaw-Rogers proposed merger is that I've said from the get-go that I will not allow the wholesale transfer of licenses from Shaw to Rogers. We want more competition, more affordability in the country. And, clearly the event of the last few days will be in the mind of the different regulators when you look at that, because you want more resiliency in the system. You want also a different choice of providers. to make sure that a system-wide impact like that we've seen, and millions of Canadians, that cannot stand. So therefore, clearly competition is key when it comes to that, and I think they understand. I spoke to them in no uncertain terms, and I think today they were very much in listening mode, because my frustration was the one of millions of Canadians, and they need to restore trust with their customers and globally as an industry provide more resiliency.
Before I let you go, Minister, part of that also has to do with that trust will have to do with what they're now going to do for their customers, the compensation. And we did speak with the President and CEO about that. But your take on that, on the compensation for customers, and it goes much wider, because there are a number of non-Rogers customers who rely on the Rogers infrastructure, like the Interact users, that were also quite impacted. So in terms of that compensation side of it, where do you stand?
Well, I say to them, do the right thing. I was very clear to them that I expect them to provide adequate and proactive compensation to their customers, and certainly that message resonated. I think it was well understood, and I expect them to follow up on that, because this is about trust. This is about the network and services that were not provided to millions of Canadians. So the message was very clear on that front as well.
So you're feeling, and we can sort of, as Canadians are listening right now, this positive, we're looking at positive steps going forward with, as you say, a proper action plan so Canadians are protected.
Yeah, well, like I said, I spoke on behalf of millions of Canadians. Frustration, unacceptable, full stop. Then you move on resiliency and compensation. That was really the frame today, and providing them 60 days to enter a formal agreement will improve resiliency. Cannot deal with every situation. It's a bit like COVID. You don't know. You know, we had one type of health emergency. You won't choose whether there's a next one, but what we can choose is to be better prepared, and I directed them to make sure they would be better prepared to deal with different eventualities, and we'll learn from the investigation of the CRTC, because that's the logical step. You investigate, then you look at the proper solution you can put in place, and certainly more resiliency. You heard from the CEO of Rogers, this was a coding error, and therefore, how do you prevent that from ever happening? And making sure we look at international best practices. These 3 steps that I've asked them to take will be helping, but there's more to come, and we'll be certainly following to make sure that you know, we have a resilient infrastructure, because we know we all rely on networks, whether it's wireless or wireline, in order to transact business, to go with their daily lives. So I think they understood the message. I was pretty clear with them when I said we expect more, and they should hear that message loud and clear, and we'll make sure that we implement additional steps.
All right, 60 days, and of course we'll be following, as you say, moving forward in terms of what those additional steps are going to be. Innovation, Science and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.